They found him mopping the hangar floor. A gray bucket, a broken broom, and a man whose back was once straighter than any rifle on that base. Nobody knew his name. They called him Old Joe. A quiet janitor with hands that trembled but never spilled a drop. He showed up before sunrise and left long after the lights went out. No one asked why. No one cared. Until the morning the general arrived. The day started like any other. Cold wind, steel sky. A new security sweep before inspection. And there he was, the old janitor standing by the flagpole, saluting. "Put that mop down, soldier," one of the guards sneered. But he didn't. He just stood there, eyes fixed on the horizon, hand to his brow. The general stopped. Something in that salute felt too exact, too perfect. He turned to the sergeant beside him. "Who's that man?" "Just a janitor, sir. Been here a few years. Bit odd, but harmless." The general squinted. That posture, he'd seen it before. Years ago, in a desert, under a different sun. Later that day, he called the man into his office. "Name?" "Joseph Blake, sir." The general froze for a second. The name landed like a shell, but he didn't show it. "Where did you serve, Mr. Blake?" Joe hesitated. "Long time ago. Doesn't matter now." "It matters to me," the general said quietly. Joe looked at him, really looked, then softly, "Air Cavalry, 42nd Tactical, call sign, Titan II." The general's pen slipped, his throat dried. He leaned back in his chair. Titan II. That name wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Every file had been sealed after the Lisbon operation. The mission nobody ever talked about. The one that went wrong. The general dismissed him with a nod, but his eyes followed Joe as he left. The same limp, the same scars, no mistake. That night, the general reopened an old archive. The files came up encrypted. Restricted by Pentagon order, the system blinked. He entered a higher code. The screen flickered. Operation, Echo, personnel file unavailable. But there, buried deep, was a single audio clip. A fragment from the radio logs. Static, chaos, screaming wind. Then a voice, sharp, calm, steady. "This is Titan II. Package secure. First down, second holding." The general froze. That same rhythm. That same pause between words. Exactly how the old man had just spoken. The next morning, Joe didn't show up. His locker was empty. His uniform gone. Security said he'd walked off base before dawn. No destination. Just gone. The general ordered a discreet trace. No paper trail, no questions. They found his name in a contractor list for a classified facility in Nevada, signed 3 months ago by a ghost unit. The authorization code? V201, Titan unit. He was still working. By evening, a black SUV stopped in front of the base. 2 men stepped out in plain clothes, badges, quiet eyes. They went straight to the general's office. "You've been looking into Joseph Blake," one said. "Why?" The general leaned back. "He served under me once." The man closed the file in his hand. "No, General. He served above you. He commanded the Lisbon detachment. He's not supposed to be alive." The general's jaw clenched. "What do you mean, not supposed to be alive?" The agent met his eyes. "Because Titan II died in Lisbon. And if he didn't, then someone else did." Outside, night fell hard. Rain hit the hangar roof in steady, military rhythm. Somewhere in that same hangar, an old mop leaned against a wall. A gray bucket still half full. And on the concrete, a single print of a combat boot. Not janitor's shoes, old issue. Air Cav. The general stood by the window, listening to the rain. He whispered the call sign again, like an old prayer. Titan II, holding. And in that moment, far away, a light blinked on a satellite relay that hadn't been active for 30 years. Coordinates rerouted. Message received. Second shoulder. Holding. They started with the cameras. Not the obvious ones. The ugly, old domes that blink red, even when they are dead. No. The mirrors. The reflections inside the network that pretend to be cameras until you trust them. Captain Clark found the first ghost in less than an hour. A copy of a copy living in the security archive. Same angles. Same timestamps. And one small lie. A janitor's cart that rolled before a door opened. "Someone's playing our day back to us," she said. "Half a frame out of time." Sergeant Major Gray leaned over her shoulder. He didn't smile much. He didn't need to. "Half a frame is enough to put a round through a rumor," he said. The general listened. Window open. Rain a quiet drum. He did not mention the word Lisbon. He did not dare. They kept it quiet. No memos, no emails. A paper that stayed in a single pocket. At dawn, a young officer from base admin tried to be brave. He threw a bucket of cold water at the janitor's boots and laughed. "Hey, old-timer," he snorted. "You missed a spot." Joe Blake did not blink. He placed the mop across the bucket. Then he did something the cameras would miss. If you didn't know where to look, he shifted his weight to the left. His right wrist hung light. His left shoulder floated like a boxer's feint. Gray saw it from 50 feet away. Reflex, range memory, not a janitor's body. A soldier's body, wrapped in quiet. The young officer kept laughing. Then he slipped. The world did what physics promised. Joe caught him before the back of his skull met the concrete. One motion, no waste. "Easy," Joe said. "Head's the last thing you want to crack." He lifted the kid back to his feet, set him steady, and walked away. He never looked at the bucket. He didn't have to. He had put the handle so it would not fall. Gray stepped into his path. "Where'd you learn that catch?" Joe's eyes stayed calm. "Where the floor is always wet and you never get a second try." The general called a meeting. Nobody would log. Just 4 people. The general, Clark, Gray, and the janitor with a name that belonged to a dead file. "Mr. Blake," the general said. "Why are you here?" Joe looked at the flag through the window. He spoke like a man making sure of every word before it leaves the room. "Because you needed a ghost," he said. "A quiet one. One that could be trusted to hold a line without asking for a medal." Caldwell's jaw tightened. So, they were past pretending now. "What do they want?" Clark asked. Joe's answer was simple. "Not us, our shadow. They want what makes us us when we are not looking. Our heat, our rhythm, our pauses. They will build a window to drink it, then play it back at us until we forget what is ours." "Can you stop it?" Gray asked. "No," Joe said. "But I can make it bite its own teeth." He showed them the trick with the mirrors. "Never stare," he said. "Make them chase a story that hurts." He called the story Walnut, a hard shell, a soft lie, a scent that makes a hunter commit before he thinks. They seeded the net with a rumor too heavy to ignore. Atlas 1 was not a rumor. Atlas 1 was a thing the base had moved last winter through a route called Lisbon N. Clark watched the network like a doctor. Bulbs lit. Ghost cameras leaned in. Something outside licked the bait. "Reading?" the general asked. "Hungry," Clark said. "And disciplined." "Military?" Gray asked. "Or someone who learned from us," Joe said. They needed a place to catch a hand, not a shadow. A gate, a routine, a weak pride. Gate 3 sat on the far side of the motor pool. Too many pallets. Too few questions. The kind of gate men use when they want things to move without moving paper. They went there without lights, rain dying. Wind slipping between the wire and the dark. A lone guard waved a contractor truck through. Badge legit. Face forgettable. Gray's palm rose. "Hold," The driver rolled down the window. His eyes had the smoothness of a man who had rehearsed not being noticed. "Problem, Sergeant?" "Depends," Gray said. "Open the back." The driver shrugged. He smiled like he was paid to be patient. He popped the latch. Inside were 3 crates, marked parts. 2 were heavy. 1 was too light. Joe climbed the bumper and tapped the light one with 2 fingers. He listened. Not for sound, for absence. "Empty," he said, "but not useless." "Sir?" the guard asked. Joe didn't answer him. He traced the crate label with a thumb. Lisbon N. Black marker. Old habit. The kind of note a man writes to himself on a day when he carries too much. Clark snapped a photo. Gray took the plate number. The general took the driver's patience and held it to a flame. "You did a job tonight," Caldwell said softly. "And you did it well. Now do another. Tell your buyer the base noticed nothing. But change one thing." "What thing?" the driver asked. "Time," Joe said. "Bring the empty where you meant to bring it, but bring it late." The driver swallowed. He was good. Not good enough to hide the swallow. He left. He would carry the swallow to his next room, his next call, his next lie. And there, a hand would tremble. Hands always do when time moves wrong. They followed the swallow into admin. Clark pulled access logs that should not exist. One account. A maintenance login that knew too much. Friendly. Old. Named like it belonged to a shelf. Service ghost. Tied to cameras. Tied to mirrors. Tied to a contractor who never looked up when he walked. Lawson. Gray exhaled through his nose. "Our night engineer," he said. "The one who fixes before it breaks." "Bring him in," Caldwell asked. "Later," Joe said. "Don't scare the fish before the hook finds bone." The general frowned. "Then what?" "Make the ghost choose," Joe said. "How?" "By offering it 2 doors," Joe said. "One that shines, one that doesn't." At 02:11, a ping lit an old relay nobody had touched since the base was built. A single line crawled across a dark monitor in the comms closet. "Do not trust the general." Clark stared at it. Her pulse lifted once, then steadied. "This is not random," she said. "This is timed." "Paranoia is the cheapest weapon," the general said, "and the first to jam." Joe looked at the line a long moment. Then he leaned close and tapped the enter key with the same finger he used to silence squeaky wheels. The screen split. Left side, the line again. Right side, a map. A simple arrow. Warehouse 19. Under it, a word in small letters. Sleep. Clark's hand went to her throat. She didn't mean to. Her body remembered the old briefings where that word meant, "Wait for the hand you trust." Gray checked his watch. He didn't need to. He did it anyway. Men who have survived long wars make friends with time. They know how long a promise can breathe before it starts to die. "Warehouse 19, he said. "That's the cold storage and the dock above Hydro 12. The general looked at Joe. "No question. Only wait." "Will they be there?" "They'll be where they think we are late," Joe said. "And we will be where late meets ready." They moved without sirens, no high beams, no shouting. Rain slowed to a thin thread that sewed the night to the roofs. Warehouse 19 breathed through a tired vent. The door clicked like a tooth. Concrete swallowed their steps. A single lane light hummed to life. Too soon. Too easy. "Mirrors," Joe said. "They want our eyes." Gray killed the lane light with a gloved knuckle. Dark came back like a friend. At the far wall, a cold box blinked one small green dot. Not on. Listening. Clark's tablet vibrated once. A window climbed her graph like a spider, learning a new web. It wasn't ours. It was near ours, leaning in, hungry. "Walnut is working," she whispered. "They're here, but not here. They're close while believing they are far. Joe stepped up to the box. He didn't open it. He didn't touch the lock. He just put his palm flat on the steel and let the metal tell him what kind of night it wanted to be. "Talk to me," he murmured. Somewhere in the ceiling, a tiny relay tapped back. 1, 2, 3. A pause. The pause that did not belong to any tech he'd ever trained. He smiled. "You do that with old ghosts. You treat them like they are not trying to kill you." "Second shoulder," he said softly, to the air, to the pipe, to the pause. "Holding." The relay tapped once more. Then a whisper came through the cold box's little speaker. Dry, low, like wind sliding under a locked door. "Package under your feet. Ghost above your head. Roofline. 5 minutes." Clark looked up on instinct. "Only steel. Only darkness." Gray touched her elbow. "Don't give the mirrors the sky," he said. Joe nodded. "Split," he said. "General with Clark. Gate side. Gray with me, ladder. Eyes off. Ears on. No one breathes loud." The general didn't argue. He didn't like splitting. He did it anyway. They moved. They always would. On the ladder to the service hatch, Gray's boot crushed a dry fleck of paint. Old number, 3 strokes. Faded, but there. 1-0. He tapped it with one finger, twice. "Still your math?" he whispered. Joe didn't answer. Not with words. He answered with the way he set his weight on the rung. Right hand, left pause. A rhythm he hadn't needed in years until tonight. Asked for it back. They reached the hatch. The air on the other side felt colder. Not a weather cold. A camera cold. Joe laid his palm to the steel. He knew what the general would ask without hearing it. "If we open this," Gray said for him, "we invite whatever's staring to drink us." "If we don't," Joe said, "we miss the hand that just knocked." He drew a slow breath, held it. Time stacked. And then a new channel clicked in his ear. No ID, no carrier. Only a whisper that cut through the bone. "Don't open. It isn't me." Joe's hand stayed on the hatch. He did not press. He did not pull. He looked at Gray. "Rooftop," he said. Now. The rooftop was slick with rain. Wind dragged the clouds low, smearing the base lights into a dull orange haze. Gray went first, his boots finding the lines between puddles like muscle memory. Joe followed slower, his breath steady, his eyes scanning not the sky, but the reflection of the sky on wet steel. That's where the truth hides. They crouched behind a vent. Across the roof, a faint glow pulsed under a sheet of tarpaulin. Too clean, too new. Not a contractor's job. Something placed. Something waiting. Gray whispered, "Tripwire." Joe tilted his head. "No, heartbeat." He slid a small sensor from his jacket. The old kind. Analog needle, cracked glass. He tapped it once. The needle twitched. A living frequency. Something, or someone, was transmitting from the roof. Below them, the general's voice came through the comm, low and even. "Report," Joe answered without moving his lips. "Device found. Alive." Clark's voice joined, faint static. "Can you identify?" "Maybe," Joe said, "if it wants to be found." They waited for the wind to rise. When it did, Joe crossed the distance between vents in 3 calm strides. A ghost balancing gravity. He knelt by the tarp, fingers tracing the corner seam. Underneath, a black case blinked once. Blue, then white. Markings erased. Wires too thin for military. Civilian build, military intention. Gray joined him. "Looks like a relay," Joe nodded. "But not sending, listening." Gray frowned. "To what?" Joe exhaled. "Us." He flipped the tarp fully back. Beneath the relay, someone had carved a word into the metal surface. Lisbon. Fresh. Carved by hand. Gray looked at Joe. "What the hell is this?" Joe's voice stayed calm. An echo. They're not chasing us, we're walking through what's already been done. Explain. Joe traced the letters with a glove. Lisbon was a message sent 30 years ago. It's still bouncing. Every time we open a channel, they read it again. We're speaking into our own past. The general listened in silence from the ground, his hand clenched around the comm unit. Clark glanced at him. "Sir, what's the protocol?" He didn't answer. He was staring at a framed photo on his desk. A black and white team of 5 men, young and alive, standing beside a chopper marked Titan. Fourth from the left, Joseph Blake. To his right, himself. Back when they believed the mission would end the war, not start another. He finally spoke. "Lock down the network. No transmissions. No power relays. Go analog." "Analog, sir?" Clark asked. "Pencil, paper, eyes and voices. No ghosts." On the roof, Joe disconnected the device. The light died instantly. But something in the air felt wrong. The hum was gone, yes. But the silence after was worse. "Feels like someone just stopped listening," Gray said. Joe shook his head. "No. Feels like they just started watching." He stood, scanning the horizon. Lightning flared, brief, white, merciless. For half a second, he saw movement on the next rooftop. 3 figures, still as statues facing them. Then gone. "Visual contact," Joe said. Gray aimed his rifle. "Orders?" "None. Let them look. They need to see what's coming." At dawn, the general met Joe outside the hangar. Steam rose from the wet asphalt. Neither saluted. They didn't need to. "You knew Lisbon wasn't over," the general said. Joe nodded. "I never believed it could be. Too many lies. Too much metal left under the sand." "They think you're dead," the general said. Joe gave a small smile. "They need me to be." "And me?" the general asked. Joe's eyes met his. "They need you to pretend that's enough." Hours later, the Pentagon called. Not officially. The kind of call that travels through 5 phones, none of which record. "General Caldwell," the voice said. "We've reviewed your incident report." Caldwell said nothing. The voice continued. "You are to stand down, immediately." "Under what authority?" "Under the one that buried Lisbon." Caldwell looked out at the airfield. The wind bent the flag halfway down the pole. He didn't answer. When the line went dead, Clark spoke softly. "They're shutting us down." Caldwell nodded. "They can try." That night in the barracks, Gray found Joe cleaning his boots. "You don't stop, do you?" Joe smiled faintly. "Habit." Gray sat opposite him. "Back in Lisbon, it was you who called second shoulder, wasn't it?" Joe looked up. The silence between them said yes. Gray's voice dropped. "You lost the whole squad." Joe nodded. "I carried the code out. That's all I could save." Gray swallowed. "You blame yourself." Joe's voice was steady. "I blame the ones who turned orders into ghosts." He tied the laces. "Tomorrow," he said, "we give the ghosts back their names." The order to stand down sat on the general's desk like a loaded holster. Unsigned, untraceable, heavy anyway. Caldwell didn't file it. He slid it under the blotter, where old paper goes to sweat. "Clock's on us," he said. "We finish before someone finishes us." Clark sealed the external links. No net, no mirrors. Analog maps spread across the table, corners held by cold mugs and a bent wrench. Gray marked routes with a carpenter's pencil. Joe stood by the window, watching the weather change like a man reading the tide. "Tonight," he said, "we stop pretending this is about files." "Then what is it about?" Clark asked. "Witness," Joe said. "A country doesn't stay honest by loving its legends. It stays honest by naming what it turned away from." They began with Lawson, night shift, tool belt. The kind of careful walk that tries not to trip over conscience. Gray and Joe caught him at the service corridor by the generators. No shouting, no guns. Just two men, and the sound of fans swallowing excuses. Lawson froze when he saw Joe. "You're the janitor." Joe held his gaze. "Say my name." Lawson glanced at Gray, back to Joe. He swallowed. "Joseph Blake." "You wrote me into your mirror," Joe said. "Then you sold the reflection." "I didn't sell anything," Lawson hissed. "I packaged access. I kept the base running when they cut people and left holes you could drive shame through." "Who paid you?" Gray asked. "Companies," Lawson said. "Fronts with clean logos. Consultants with soft hands. They said the Pentagon wanted efficiency. They said the mirrors saved money. They said no one gets hurt." "No one you had to look at," Joe said. Something trembled behind Lawson's eyes. He tried to speak and found a stone in his throat. "They told me the Lisbon thing was a myth," he whispered. "They said Titan II was invented so you could bury a failed op and sell a clean war." Gray leaned closer. "Look at him," he said. "Does he look invented?" Lawson sagged against the cinder block. The fans kept eating air. He nodded once, small, like a man finally agreeing with gravity. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Names," Joe said. "Real ones, not logos." Lawson, to his credit, did not lie again. He pulled a little spiral notebook from his back pocket, the paper kind that leaves pencil on your fingers. He wrote 5 names. He added 2 cities, 1 flight number. He tore the page out and handed it to Gray, like a man handing over a map to a minefield he set. "Why, keep it on paper?" Clark asked. Lawson tried to smile, failed. "Because mirrors don't steal from paper," he said. "Yet." "Come with us," Gray said. Lawson shook his head. "They'll bury me." Joe nodded to the old relay rule. "Then don't go anywhere. We'll come back to find you. That's how witness beats fear." They left him with his notebook and the fans, and the thing that was finally heavier than money. The meeting was in the old ops room. No cameras, no glass. A clock with a second hand that clicked like a Geiger counter. Caldwell set Lawson's page in the middle of the table. Clark ran her pencil under every letter, tasting the pressure. Gray worked a call sheet, the kind you tear from the top as if removing thin ice from a well. Joe didn't sit. He went to the wall, where a year's dead map still clung to old tape. He put his finger on a mark that read Lisbon, not Portugal, not even a city. A code that meant crossroad where plans go to choose who they belong to. "You were command," Caldwell said quietly. Not a question. Joe didn't look back. "I carried command out. That's different." Clark turned. "Then say it. Say what Lisbon was." Joe breathed once, like a man taking a number he doesn't want to read out loud. "Lisbon was a handoff," he said. "A witness moving through a corridor of countries that promised things they couldn't say out loud. We were the corridor. We were supposed to be invisible." Gray's knuckles tapped the table once. And the corridor was paved with mirrors," Joe said. "We learned too late. We were seen just enough to be erased. The file said I died. Someone had to die." The story needed a clean ending. Caldwell stared at the paper. "Whose decision?" Joe looked at him. "The kind that doesn't sign with ink." Silence took the room for a full 10 ticks of the second hand. It felt like an honor guard. Then Caldwell straightened. "Tonight, we end the mirror economy," he said. "At least on this base, we make a kind of noise that doesn't need speakers." "How?" Clark asked. "By doing what mirrors can't," Joe said. "Stand, speak, write, sign. In public." Gray's mouth tugged at one corner. A soldier's smile. "A ceremony." "A testimony," Joe said. "Ceremonies put names on stones. Testimony puts names back in mouths." They chose dawn, cold, clean light. From the loudspeaker tower that still worked when the network pretended to be asleep, Clark wired a simple mic and a portable recorder. No stream. No upload. A cassette tape she had found in a drawer that smelled like the 80s. Caldwell stood on the steps of admin. Pilots, mechanics, clerks, cooks, gate guards. They came because rumor had done what orders couldn't. A janitor stood to the general's left, Sergeant Major Gray to the right, Captain Clark at the board with the cassette, Lawson, pale and silent, in the third row, hands in his pockets, notebook folded like a confession. The flag pulled at its ties. The sky looked undecided. Caldwell didn't clear his throat. He didn't need to. "This morning," he began, "we break a quiet that did not keep us safe." A few heads lifted. "We have run this place on mirrors. They told us it was efficient. It is cheaper to reflect than to see. Cheaper to replay than to remember. Cheaper to borrow a shadow than to ask a person to stand." He let the second hand click twice. "No more." He turned to Joe. "Mr. Blake." Joe stepped up to the mic. He didn't salute. He did something older. He adjusted the stand so the metal wouldn't ring, so the voice would carry without scraping. "My name is Joseph Blake," he said. "I served where my country told me. I carried home what I could. Some of it was air. Some of it was names." He looked at Lawson, then at the deck of faces that had learned to look away. "I am called Titan II, in files you aren't supposed to see," he said. "Those files say I died. I didn't. Men under my command did. Men beside me did. The record chose a story that made the math cleaner. Today we will make the math honest." He unfolded a piece of paper. It wasn't thin. It had weight. "These are the names of the Lisbon squad," he said. He read them, one by one. No ranks ahead of names. Just names. When he finished, no one clapped. They stood there with their hats in their hands and the wind filling the space where applause lives in peacetime. Joe set the paper down. "Now the living," he said, "and the ones who got lost inside a country that learned to love mirrors." He nodded to Lawson. Lawson took 2 half steps and stopped like a man at the door of his own house after a long absence. "My name is Trevor Lawson," he said, voice thin but audible. "I let outsiders wire our cameras to copies. I told myself we needed it. I told myself no one would get hurt. I was wrong. I made money on the difference between seeing and watching. I am done." He put the spiral notebook on the rail. "These are names," he said. "Real ones." Caldwell took the page and handed it to Clark without looking away from the crowd. Clark read the names, then the companies, then the flight, then the city offices that were real addresses with fake skeletons. No drama. Just the language that wakes lawyers and scares polite men more than any rifle ever did. When she finished, a young airman in the back wiped his face with his sleeve like he was ashamed of tears, and no one corrected him. Gray stepped forward. "This base stands because men and women held to boring rules," he said. "Boring saves lives. We will be boring again. We will check locks with hands. We will check faces with names. We will let paper slow us where speed sells us." He looked at Joe. "Anything else?" Joe touched the mic. "You've heard the phrase second shoulder today," he said. "It's not a legend. It's not code for a hero. It means a simple thing. When the first shoulder goes down, by luck, by bullet, by lie, the second shoulder carries the weight. That's all. No statues." He put a hand on the rail and leaned like a man who'd carried weight long enough to know when to rest it without dropping it. "If somewhere out there the first shoulder hears me," he said, quieter now, "it should know. I'm still holding." He stepped back. Silence did what good silence does. It stitched people together without thread. They moved fast after that. Caldwell signed papers with ink, contracts severed, keys reclaimed. Clark scrubbed the nets like a mother cleaning a wound. Gray walked the gates with a clipboard and a pencil, and the patience of a man who knew rocks turn into walls, one quiet brick at a time. Lawson turned state's witness. He gave more pages. Handwriting got steadier as the days went on. He moved into the small trailer behind the motor pool. He patched fences and learned that apologies are work, not words. The Pentagon called again. This time it wasn't a voice behind 5 phones. It was a colonel who drove down himself and stood on the same steps and listened, with his mouth closed. He left without taking anyone's badge. 2 weeks later, a short letter arrived. Not an apology. Something better and rarer. An acknowledgement. Corrective actions noted. Local command discretion affirmed. Caldwell pinned it under the blotter beside the stand-down order. The 2 papers stared at each other like rival towns across a river. One evening, gray gold light poured over the tarmac. Clark found Joe on the roof, sitting at the edge with his legs over the side like a kid who didn't know fear yet. "Dangerous seat," she said. He patted the tar paper. "Safer than mirrors." She sat beside him. "You never told me what beam meant," she said. "You used it like a password that wasn't a word." Joe watched a flock of birds swing over the far hangars and turn as one. "It was the sound the mast made in the old days when wind hit it right," he said. "A single note you could hear in your bones. We'd say beam when we needed to remind each other that sound beats sight in a storm." "And first?" she asked, softer. Joe smiled without showing teeth. "Some men need to be found," he said. "Some men need to be followed. Some men need to be trusted not to return. First chose the last. It's not abandonment. It's a kind of guard duty." Clark nodded. She didn't pretend to understand everything. She understood enough. Below them, Gray crossed the parade ground with a new private and a battered broom. He showed the kid how to put the handle across the bucket so it wouldn't fall. The kid did it wrong. Gray corrected him. The kid did it right. "You going to keep mopping?" Clark asked. Joe looked at his hands. "They keep me honest," he said. "Floors don't care what you used to be." He stood. "Walk." They went down past the old clock that clicked, past the framed photo where young men looked like a promise they believed, past Lawson's trailer where a porch light burned steady. At the gate, the guard on duty saluted. He wasn't showing off. He had learned what his hand was for. Joe returned it, not crisp, warm. "Evening Titan 2, the guard said, then flinched, like he'd broken a rule. Joe shook his head. "Just Joe," he said. "Names belong to now." They walked on until the base fell behind them and the sky kept only a little light left on. Crickets tried a rhythm. An owl corrected them. "Do you ever stop listening?" Clark asked. "Listening is rest," Joe said. "It lets the noise go home." They stood on the small rise where you could see the whole field. The runways, the roofs, the flag that didn't have to fight so hard tonight. Somewhere a relay clicked. Not digital. Old copper settling after a warm day. Joe closed his eyes. "If you're up there," he said into the cooling air, not loud, not small. "The second shoulder's still here. The mast still stands." Wind moved through the grass like someone smoothing a wrinkled sheet. In the headset he wasn't wearing. In the channel that didn't exist. Something almost like a breath touched the back of his neck. He smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't need witnesses. "Hold while I breathe," the memory whispered. "Breathe while I hold," he answered. They turned back toward the lights. Behind them, on the fence post where the paint peeled, someone, Lawson maybe, had written with a carpenter's pencil, where only men who'd learned to look would notice. 1-0, not poetry. Math. Proof that one living witness is not the same as none. Back inside the gate, Gray was teaching the kid how to coil a hose so it wouldn't kink in the morning. Boring. Saving. Caldwell stood at his office window, hands in his pockets, watching the base not as a legend, but as a place. He looked down at the 2 papers under the blotter. He added a third, a calendar page, blank with today's date. Then he turned off the lamp and left the door open.